Thanks for having me.
So let's start off with this first question because I think it's an obvious one. You know, there's a whole division out there. Some people believe UFOs exist, some people don't. What's your take? Are UFOs real?
Well, I think the majority opinion now is that UFOs are real. Even the United States government admits it. MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, has been around since 1955, studying hundreds of thousands of cases of UFO reports, some very strongly substantiated. So whether or not UFOs are real is really no longer a mainstream question. Even the government admits it.
I think maybe what Tia was alluding to here is not the existence of UFOs, which we all know there's unidentified aerial phenomenon in the sky all the time, but whether they come from a different planet. Your take on that?
Well, you know, the way the government is couching this, and I spoke with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand personally about this, they don't want to say aliens from another planet. They're much more comfortable calling it non-human intelligence and speculating that it could come from a lot of different places. And that seems to be the trend in how we're seeing this. We may have nuts and bolts craft of extraterrestrials that are visiting us, but it's also leading us to the conclusion that there's a whole lot of different types of life that we might not understand that could be at play here. And that seems to be more widely acknowledged. That's why when the government issues a report, they can say things like, oh, we found no evidence of aliens. But they're not saying they found no evidence of non-human intelligence with technology capabilities engaging the human race. So the new catchphrase that catches it all is non-human intelligence.
I like that. Okay.
Can I ask one, just because I want to make sure I heard him correctly. Did you say we may have the nuts and bolts of a craft built by non-human intelligence? Is that what you said?
There's been stories that have circulated for, ever since the Roswell days and even before, that the government and agencies within private industry are in possession of non-human craft and non-human technology. And the truth to that is coming out more and more. There's a scientist named Dr. Gary Nolan who was actually tasked with studying some of the materials from this. And it's pretty much common knowledge among the insiders. It hasn't bubbled up into the mainstream public testimony at a congressional hearing. But behind closed doors, these guys in Washington, D.C. have all been informed, and most of them know that the government is in possession of non-human technology.
So that's very interesting that you say that. Congress is obviously holding this really high-profile hearing, and it's called Restoring Public Trust Through UAP Transparency and Whistleblower Protection. Do you think they kind of want to raise the veil on this? You mentioned, they have some of these mechanics, I guess, in their possession. Do you think they want to raise the veil and reveal this to the public?
There are some people in Washington, D.C., and I've been in Washington, D.C. working with a lot of these people. MUFON was instrumental in some of the things that you see bubbling up to the surface. So I personally know a lot of the people that are leading the UAP, the UAP exposure through the congressional and political process, the congressmen and the senators. But yeah, they really care, but they're also up against the fact that we do have national security. We do have highly classified stuff. You can get guys that have worked on these programs to come in, but they can't talk to a congressman about what they know because the congressman probably doesn't have the clearance. So we're dealing with this whole political dance right now that we're seeing unfold in Washington. But the bottom line is there are people in D.C. that are very dedicated towards bringing as much of this knowledge as possible to the public.
Okay, so that leads to my next question, that is the significance of today's hearing in particular. Will you kind of put this in context with recent history? Because I know a lot of these phenomenon have been getting buzz. We all saw that footage from those, I think they were Navy pilots where they saw those, those lights.
Buzzing around.
Buzzing around.
Sure.
It really raised a lot of eyebrows. But put today's hearing in context with kind of recent history with regard to UAPs.
Well, I think that today's hearing, as far as UFO hearings go, are not as explosive as some of the previous ones. We recently had Lou Elizondo. We've had David Grush, who actually came forward and said that he was made aware of these reverse engineering programs. The witnesses today are people that have seen something and have a certain amount of credibility. And of course, George Knapp, who is a the legendary journalist in the field. But as far as firsthand witnesses coming forth and saying, oh, I worked on a reverse engineering program at this base, this is what we had, we're not getting that from these hearings. So as much as they're going to move the ball a little bit, they're not moving the ball enough to satisfy the people that really want answers.
Why do you think that is? Because like I started off with a question about, are UFOs real? Really, the question is about aliens, right? Because that's part of all of this. Why do you think it is that the government wouldn't want to talk about this? Is this, you know, in fear of the public response to this? Why keep it under wraps?
Well, there's several reasons for this, and first and foremost is that we believe that, and have a good case for the fact that this is a deception that goes back into the 30s and even really all the way back through recorded history. But in the modern day, a lot of people have done a lot of things that they do not want to be accountable for. Keeping some of this technology, some of these secrets from humanity can border on criminal. And with some of these corporations that are holding this stuff, there's all kinds of legal issues that pop up. And the other is, you know, national security. We don't want to tip our hand to what we may have or what we may have created from having possession of some of this technology. And then, you know, the other thing is, how much is it going to disrupt society? If it's, hey, there's extraterrestrials, they're around us, they're not a threat, well, life goes on pretty much as normal. But if there's something dark and mysterious behind this, or there is a threat, that's not something they want to just parade out in front of people. They've got to be very, very careful how they spill this knowledge. And what we're seeing now since 2017 is that this knowledge is coming forth. It's not coming forth as fast as we want it, and it's not coming forth in the full disclosure that we all want to see, but we are getting information.
Ron, let me ask you this. You and MUFON, is that how it's pronounced? M-U-F-O-N?
Yeah, it stands for the Mutual UFO Network.
All right, so you guys have been kind of tracking civilian reports for UFOs for decades and decades. In your mind, what is the most compelling piece of tangible, non-classified evidence that all of us could have access to that you have seen in your years, which convinces you that this is a very, very real thing?
Well, we have several cases of actual physical materials, and in my film that came out in 2023, we cover some of these materials that have a track record that doesn't add up to the actual facts of their origin, and that the case for these coming from non-human technology is very strong. And then we have new materials that are coming forth that people have come into possession of that are defying testing and coming back with test results that we simply can't understand where they came from. Isotopic ratios that don't match materials made on Earth. So we have an increasing collection of physical samples that are defying testing and explanation, and these are more and more in the possession of civilians. We have some right now that we've opened up the invitation for anybody that wants to test some of this, they can.
What is the, two follow-up questions there. Yeah. The movie, because I would love to check that out.
Yeah, I would love to see.
Right? And then what is the material? So both those questions.
Sure. So the movie is called Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations. It's narrated by Matthew Modine, and it is now, it's gone through its cycle. So you can watch it on YouTube now for free on YouTube Movies. And the sequel to Accidental Truth is coming out in winter. It's called Accidental Truth Next. One example of materials is something called nitinol. In the Roswell history, there was supposedly this kind of material that you could wad it up and it would bounce back. And all kinds of witnesses spoke about encountering that material at the Roswell crash site. Well, it turns out that we have a material that we created called nitinol, and it does exactly that. It's a shape-shifting, memory-retaining metal alloy. You can bend it and it'll pop back. And when you trace the origins of this material, it supposedly came out of a naval weapons research laboratory in the 50s. But if you dig a little deeper, you find out that the actual original research that led to nitinol came out of a place called Battelle Memorial Institute back in the 40s. And this company, this institute, was under contract from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to study exotic materials. And so the stories about materials, the shape-shifting materials coming out of Roswell, the fiction behind where we created our own shape-shifting materials, and the actual history of where this stuff came from points very strongly to the recovery of materials that were beyond our technology at the time.
That's
and there's
so
a lot
fascinating.
I'm very fascinated. I have so many questions, Ron. One question that comes to mind, it may sound a little childlike, but it's a real question. So is there a belief that these unidentified objects are being made by aliens? Are they living among us? Are they living on a planet somewhere? What's the thought process behind that part of it?
You know, it's interesting. The general consensus at this point in time is that it could be all of the above. There could be a civilization that's been living on this planet for a very long time that is way more advanced from us, underwater, inside the earth, underground. They could be connected with extraterrestrial species. And then we also have all kinds of other life forms that are popping up, like plasmoids and energetic beings and interdimensional beings. So science is struggling to even find the words to describe everything that we're seeing. But one thing is for sure, there's very little dispute anymore among people that are really paying attention. There's some kind of advanced non-human intelligence in our midst. It's been with us from the beginning of time, chronicled in religions, chronicled in legends and spiritual teachings, all the way through to now. A lot of people think that it's the same types of entities that we've been talking about since we've been able to write things down.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up. It seems like more often these days we're seeing this. Do you think that is because these objects are appearing more, or do you think that is because of technology like cell phones, for example?
I think that we're reaching an apex in the evolution of our society, and that we're really at a point where decisions we make right now are going to lead us to two different radical outcomes. If we go down one path, it's almost certain self-destruction. If we can get our act together and start behaving differently in the way we treat each other, we could have a potential utopian future. And so we are at this turning point where these decisions are pivotal. And so the increase in activity in encounters with non-human intelligence, a lot of people think, is part of a wake-up call for humanity, giving us the opportunity to really reflect, because it all ties in. We are at a very pivotal time, and we're making some bad decisions. And if we continue down this path, we're not going to have a good outcome. And I think that any non-human intelligence, wherever they're from, that has any interest in us or the value of our planet is going to start turning up the heat a little bit on humanity to get its act together.
Yeah. What is your take on, if they are here among us, their incentive?
They're ready to get out of here.
Is it about Earth? Yeah.
They're like, I'm over these people.
These are some crazy people. We're out here. Yeah. Like leaving a party. What is your theory in terms of what they'd even be interested in Earth for? Is it the resources here? Is it the internet?
That's pretty funny. Well, look, if you are a intergalactic realtor, Earth's a pretty prime piece of real estate.
Okay.
It's in the sweet zone. It's got life. It's got a huge abundance of DNA and interesting things that can happen. There's a lot of reasons why, extraterrestrials would be interested in Earth, but there's also the whole aspect of the spiritual aspect of it. And so you have to look at the broad picture, and you have to compare it with some of the things that we've been taught through time. And so I think that we're dealing with kind of an as above, so below. There's probably more than one non-human intelligence that's engaging us, and they probably all have slightly different agendas, and some could have polar opposite agendas. So we can't just put them in a box and say this is who they are and this is what they want. It's way more complicated than that.
That crossroads you just mentioned about, hey, we are at a crossroads right now, a fork in the road, whether we're going to self-destruct or if we're going to strive towards some utopian future. Let's bring it back to the hearings, these whistleblowers. How important in the very, very short term is transparency in your mind, with regard to this crossroads that you mentioned?
Well, I honestly believe that if humanity had the information about our place in the universe and what kinds of beings we're surrounded by and what kind of galactic citizens we are, it would enable each individual to make decisions based on a broader set of facts. Mm-hmm. Because we're never going to progress as a species or as a civilization forward if the individual people that are making these decisions aren't making them on an individual basis. So denying humanity the knowledge that we're not alone in the universe, and denying us the knowledge that some of these groups have, it's really making it very difficult for us to evolve as individual beings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes sense, what you're saying. What's your take on Anunnaki?
Okay, in our history, there seems to be a few very, very strong cases for evidence of tampering with our biological progression. And the story about the Anunnaki, that was Zachariah Sitchin went back and he translated the Sumerian texts, which were the earliest known form of writing in this iteration of civilization. And according to him, it tells a story about a whole alien species that came down here, genetically re-engineered the existing primates and made us to basically work for them and do work on the planet. And then at some point, they left us to our own devices, so to speak. That's a hotly debated subject, whether it's true or not. The evidence is pretty strong that something like that could have happened, whether it's that specific thing or not. People are still arguing that point.
Yeah.
I gotta go down a wormhole on that one online because I hadn't heard of Anunnaki before.
Yeah, I could keep talking with you. I have so many questions.
I mean, it's fun to consider these possibilities. Ron, it's a fascinating discussion. What do you think is next on the horizon in this whole realm?
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be some sort of acknowledgement that they found some sort of life off planet. It might be a microbe on Mars, doesn't matter what it is, but there's going to be an acknowledgement of off-planet life, and there's going to be a continued slow drip that we get through Washington, D.C. But what we really have to start looking at is things that we used to think were totally crazy and made no sense. Things like ESP, extrasensory perception, things like people, alien abductees, for example, that are saying they've had these things happen to them. In order to make sense of everything that we're seeing, we're going to have to start listening to some of these accounts with fresh ears. And we're going to have to start revising what we know about science, what we know about the nature of reality, what we know about time and space, because everything we think we know is slowly unwinding into the need for a whole new definition of who and what we are.
Yeah, well, it's a lot that we could keep talking about. Ron James with the Mutual UFO Network. We appreciate you joining us. This is so interesting. Yeah, we definitely appreciate it.